Buck, I think that's over. I think that's done, but
What do you mean?
I think his career is finished.
But what did happen was Buck and Lil Jimmy ended up meeting everybody at Cash Money Records. And the first thing that Birdman told Buck was to spit a freestyle for him, and he put him up against Lil Wayne at that time, and they went back and forth. And that ended up impressing Birdman.
That line from 50 Cent hit different because not long after that, Young Buck's whole life flipped. He went bankrupt, the IRS came knocking, and he even ended up locked up over probation issues. His career didn't crash overnight. It fell apart piece by piece. And the real reason behind all of it is way darker than most fans ever imagined. From the streets to the spotlight, Buck's journey was never clean or easy. Growing up in Nashville, Tennessee, David Brown wasn't living any smooth lifestyle, not even close. He bounced around constantly. From North Nashville to South Nashville's J.C. Napier projects, then to the South 7th area.
Buck ended up coming on with them and hopefully having his situation figured out as well. But as years went on, Buck said he spent 3 to 4 years with Cash Money and none of his music ever got released. He got essentially put on the back burner while the other artists on Cash Money like Lil Wayne, Juvenile, BG, so on and so forth ended up blowing up.
By the time he was a kid, he already knew Nashville from one side to the other, seeing different neighborhoods and different energies, all of which shaped the raw tone in his music later on. To bring in a little money and help at home, Buck was grinding any way he could in legit ways. Pumping gas for tips, cutting lawns, cleaning up cars, anything that could put a few dollars in his pocket. Music became his escape, his drive, the dream that kept him focused when nothing else made sense. He started freestyling with his day ones, battling anyone bold enough to step up, and little by little, he built a strong buzz in Nashville's underground hip-hop scene. Then comes the moment that really showed Buck's early hunger and straight-up hustle mentality. Buck and his homie found a CD by BG, Chopper City, and noticed a phone number for Cash Money Records printed on the back. These two young cats didn't even fully know what they were doing, but they dialed that number with a wild plan in mind.
And out of my ordeal back in the streets, I ended up getting shot in a home invasion and a robbery. One in the arm and one in the upper thigh area. It was enough for me to wake up and really realize that, yo, if this shit keep going on like this, I'm either to get killed or I'm gonna go to jail. And I really realized that because I was getting down for real. Really started to devote more of my time to the music then, the studio.
They told Cash Money they wanted to book them for a show in Nashville for around $5,000. And somehow they actually managed to lock in that booking. The performance ended up never happening. But what did happen changed Buck's entire life for good. No exaggeration. That moment set off everything that came next. Birdman was so impressed that he flew Buck out to New Orleans on the spot, ready to talk business, and maybe even lock in a deal with Cash Money Records. This was the kind of chance most artists dream about, and Buck jumped at it with everything he had. At just 14, Buck made one of the biggest calls of his entire life. He dropped out of school completely to chase rap full-time. We're not here to judge whether that was the right move for someone that young, but it shows you how locked in he was. This wasn't a side hobby or some maybe one-day dream. This was his whole mission, and he was serious about it.
Juvie happened to pull up at the office, and when he pulled up, he was kind of shocked to see me there. I'm like, I've been here for a whole week. And he was like, man, you want to get up out of here for a minute? You know what I'm saying? And I took that ride with Juvie, and that's where my career started with Juvenile.
The only real proof Buck even has from his Cash Money chapter is a quick appearance in the Big Timers, Big Ballin' music video. By 1999, he was fed up with being sidelined while everyone else around him was shining. Buck finally said, forget it, walked away from Cash Money, and went back to Nashville ready to build himself up from zero again. But those years weren't wasted at all. He picked up major game about how the music world really works and built key connections with people like DJ Paul from 3-6 Mafia and Juvenile, ties that would become priceless down the line. Once he got back home, Buck linked up with his day ones and got back to the grind independently. No label, no big team, just raw hustle. On August 22nd, 2000, he and his homie D-Tay dropped Thuggin' Till the End, and something crazy happened. That independent project actually charted on Billboard, number 34 on the R&B charts and number 17 on the indie charts. For an unknown rapper from Nashville with no machine behind him, This was huge. Buck pushed around 10,000 units on his own, and while that wouldn't shake a major label, for someone selling straight out the trunk, it was a major win. More importantly, it proved people were really listening, and this rap dream could actually turn into a real career.
A week after the deal fizzled out with UTP, 50 Cent ended up calling Young Buck and said, "Hey, we want that Bloodhound track. We'll pay you $20,000 for it. Let us put it on the album." And the track is getting mixed by Eminem and Dr. Dre.
Then came the moment that flipped his whole mindset. After surviving a shooting during a home invasion, Buck made a promise to himself: no more street life, full focus on the music grind from here on out. And right when he needed direction the most, an opportunity slid right back into his life through one of his old Cash Money ties. DJ Paul from 3-6 Mafia, who had always respected Buck's talent and writing skills, heard about what happened and immediately reached out. He sent Project Pat to scoop Buck from Nashville and bring him to Memphis to lay down new tracks. Out of those Memphis sessions came Buck's first real album placement. Memphis on 3-6 Mafia's When the Smoke Clears, 66-61 album. That moment was the boost he needed, the kind of exposure that finally put his name in rooms he'd never been in before. Even with that major look, Buck didn't end up signing with 3-6 Mafia, so he went right back to Nashville and kept pushing independently. But now he had way more eyes on him and way stronger connections. But let's slow down for a second, because the story of how Buck actually ended up joining G-Unit is wild. The whole G-Unit chapter didn't just happen. It unfolded in a chaotic way that nobody could have predicted. And it all started when Birdman, Buck's old link from Cash Money, hit him up again with a new offer. By this time, Cash Money had completely transformed. Bigger buildings, luxury cars everywhere. The whole place looked like a level-up fantasy. Birdman wanted Buck to join a new group he was building called Head Ready to See What Was Up. But the same old problems started creeping back in. Days went by with no real movement, no contract, no clear plan, and Buck wasn't that same young kid anymore. He had real life waiting for him back home, and he wasn't trying to sit around with nothing happening. Then something unexpected happened that flipped everything.
Sha Money had became a best friend of mine. I'm the best man on this man's wedding. That's how close Sha was. Me and Sha were probably closer than me and 50. Him and 50 was, so I'm the best man of this man's wedding. I'm judging Sha not from a business standpoint of his problems with 50, but looking at him as my brother.
Juvenile walked into the Cash Money office and was shocked to see Buck just sitting there waiting. Juvenile was dealing with his own issues with Cash Money at the time, and he pulled Buck aside with an offer that would change the entire direction of his career. But here's where Buck showed real street smarts. Juvenile gave him a contract to sign, and Buck took it home, slid it under his bed, and never signed the paperwork. That move says everything about how sharp he was even back then. During that time, Buck kept working non-stop and dropped 2 projects: Born to Be a Thug on October 10th, 2002, and a compilation with the UTP Pliers on October 8th, 2002. These releases kept his name buzzing while the next chapter of his career was quietly lining up behind the scenes. Technically, Buck was never officially signed on paper, and that was on purpose. He wasn't moving reckless. He was watching the game and learning from everything he saw go down at Cash Money. He already knew Juvenile was dealing with his own problems and personal beefs over there, and the whole situation looked shaky. Buck wasn't about to lock himself into something unstable, no matter how good it sounded on the surface. At one point, Juvenile straight up told Buck that if something better came his way, he should take it and run with it. So when Buck and Juvenile hit the road and their tour bus pulled into New York in 2002, right when 50 Cent had the whole city on fire, the universe lined things up perfectly. 50 was the most talked about artist in New York. The streets were buzzing heavy, and Buck could feel that energy in the air. The tour bus driver just so happened to know 50's former manager, Shaw Money XL, and Buck kept pressing him non-stop to connect them. He wanted 50 on that bus to cook something up. And wild enough, it actually happened. 50 pulled up, but he came strictly to record with Juvenile, not Buck. While 50 and Juvenile were locked in at the back of the bus working on songs, Buck made a slick move. He started playing his own solo heat for Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo, who were chilling up front. One of Buck's tracks grabbed Banks' attention instantly. Banks took that beat straight to the back, where 50 was recording. 50 heard it, and he jumped on it. That track turned into Bloodhound on the legendary Get Rich or Die Tryin' album. And even though it wasn't the first song with all four of them, that was A Little Bit of Everything on the 50 Cent is the Future mixtape. Bloodhound was the track that introduced Buck to the mainstream world loud and clear. 50 was feeling Buck heavy. But at that time, he couldn't offer him a deal because he wasn't signed to a major label yet. Even so, he didn't forget Buck. And just like Buck expected, when things eventually fell apart with UTP, fate stepped in again and opened the door that would change everything. Dre stepped in, co-signed the move, and Buck was officially brought into G-Unit. The kind of opportunity most rappers only dream about. After everything he'd been through, all the setbacks and near misses, this was finally the break that felt real. Buck's first major look on G-Unit Records was Bloodhound on 50's Get Rich or Die Tryin', but 50 played it smart with Buck's rollout. Instead of rushing into Buck's solo album, 50 decided to introduce him to the world the right way, through a full G-Unit group project. That album, Beg for Mercy, went crazy. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and moved 377,000 copies in the first week. To this day, it's moved over 2.7 million copies in the US and is creeping toward diamond numbers worldwide. With that drop, Young Buck officially touched the biggest stage in the game, and everybody back home was watching with pride. Following G-Unit's winning formula, Buck dropped a mixtape called Welcome to the Hood on May 31st, 2004, hosted by DJ Whoo Kid. It built the perfect momentum for his solo come-up. And by July 2nd, 2004, the first single, Let Me In, featuring 50 Cent, was out. That track hit number 34 on the Billboard Hot 100 and had his name ringing everywhere. Then came the real milestone. August 24th, 2004. Buck released his debut album Straight Outta Cashville, and the numbers were insane. The album debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and pushed 361,000 units its first week, eventually going platinum. His second single, Shorty Wanna Ride, became his highest charting solo track ever, hitting number 17 on the Hot 100. But this wasn't just about album sales or charts. Buck did something historic. He shattered what people called the Nashville curse, becoming the first non-country artist from the city to break into the mainstream in a massive way. For years, artists complained that Nashville wouldn't let anything outside of country music win. And Buck completely smashed that wall, opening doors for the whole city to step through. Then came November 15th, 2004, at the Vibe Awards. And that night, something wild went down that would leave a long shadow over Buck's career. Dr. Dre, Eminem, 50 Cent, the whole G-Unit squad, and Suge Knight were all in the building that night. Out of nowhere, a dude named Jimmy Johnson allegedly put his hands on Dr. Dre. And that's when things jumped off. Young Buck was accused of stabbing Jimmy Johnson, and the whole place turned chaotic. Buck dipped out and went on the run for a couple days before turning himself in. It took almost a year and a half for the whole situation to finally settle. Buck ended up getting 3 years of probation and had to complete 80 hours of community service. Even though the consequences weren't as serious as they could have been, this moment was the first big warning sign. The first hint that Buck's street instincts and his ride for the crew loyalty could one day wreck everything he had built. But in 2005, Buck didn't slow down at all. He kept grinding heavy and stacking wins. He popped up on 3-6 Mafia's massive hit, Stay Fly, which hit number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 and went double platinum. On top of that, he dropped an independent album to promote the artist he was developing for G-Unit South, a Division 50 had put Buck in charge of. Buck wasn't just a rapper now. He was leveling up into an executive, building his own branch inside the G-Unit empire. By 2006, Buck was flooding the streets with mixtapes while prepping his next official album. On February 6, 2006, he dropped Case Dismissed, the introduction of G-Unit South with DJ Drama, a project that celebrated him finally closing that Vibe Awards case, while also showcasing the talent he was raising under the G-Unit South banner. But while Buck was locked in on creating his second album, Buck the World, things behind the scenes started getting messy. 50 Cent and their mutual manager, Shaw Money XL, fell into a serious disagreement. 50 called a meeting and told every G Unit member that they all needed new management because he was cutting ties with Shaw Money completely. And this is where Buck's loyalty, the same trait that made him so respected, turned into a problem for him. Buck and Shaw Money were extremely close. Close enough that Buck was the best man at Shaw Money's wedding. So when 50 said everybody had to drop Shaw Money, Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo followed orders immediately. But Buck refused. Buck saw Shaw Money as family, not just some manager on payroll. In his eyes, Shaw hadn't done anything wrong to him personally, and Buck truly believed 50 and Shaw would eventually sort things out. So he didn't feel right cutting off someone who had always held him down. But 50 took that as straight-up disloyalty, like Buck was choosing sides against him, and that flipped the whole vibe immediately. The tension kicked in fast. You'd see Banks, Yayo, and 50 together at shows and big events, but Buck and Shaw Money were out there promoting Buck's project by themselves, and Buck always felt like this is why Buck the World didn't hit the way it should have. It dropped on March 27, 2007, debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 with around 140,000 first-week sales, and eventually went gold. But the singles, I Know You Want Me and Get Buck, didn't come close to the impact of his first album's hits, and without the full G Unit machine behind him, the momentum just wasn't the same. At the same time, 50 started accusing Buck of being cool with all of his rivals. The Game, Jadakiss, Fat Joe, Jim Jones, everybody. Buck kept trying to explain that he wasn't out making friends. He was actually passing info back to 50 about what those dudes were saying. But 50 didn't see it like that. To him, even talking to the opposition counted as a violation. And it didn't stop there. 50 also said Buck was burning through money with no control and refusing to stay on top of his taxes. According to 50, he had paid Buck's taxes twice before reaching his limit. By 2008, Buck found out he owed the IRS $300,000. A brutal situation that only made everything messier. The start of 2008 was rough. In January, Buck hit a show with Lil Wayne and Birdman, and both of them publicly said Buck should leave G Unit and come join Young Money/Cash Money. And right there on stage, Buck basically agreed. That footage made its way to 50, and he was furious. Then February hit, and G Unit dropped a mixtape called Return of the Body Snatchers Volume 1, and Buck was nowhere on it. Fans were confused because he had just appeared on a track called Feel Good with the crew months earlier. And then came the moment that blew everything apart. The moment that sent Buck into the spiral that would change his whole life forever. He's still dealing with the fallout from that moment today. The fall, the bankruptcy, the long road trying to climb back up. Everything started spiraling in March 2008, when 50 Cent and Young Buck had a private phone call that nobody knew about. Except 50 was secretly recording the whole thing. After that call, things looked cool again. Buck even jumped on some tracks for the G Unit mixtape Elephant in the Sand that same month. For a short second, it felt like maybe the beef was dying down and they could actually fix things. But that peace didn't last long at all. On March 20th, 2008, an interview with Yo Raps magazine dropped where Buck said, "I'm still waiting on a royalty check, period. I've never seen a royalty check since I've signed with G Unit. So hell yeah, I'll tell you one damn thing, that show money is that good. I've never in my career cashed a royalty check." That hit the internet like a bomb. But here's the wild part. That interview was old. It had been recorded months earlier, but the outlet waited and dropped it right when Buck and 50 were finally trying to get cool again. The timing was brutal. Almost like someone wanted to blow the whole situation up just as it was being repaired. Shaw Money XL tried to put out the fire the next day, saying Buck had made over $10 million under 50's direction, trying to shut down the royalty rumors. But it was too late. The tension was already rising again. Then on April 7th, 2008, early Monday morning, 50 called into Hot 97 and announced live on air that Young Buck was officially out of G Unit as a group, although he was still signed as a solo artist to G Unit Records. A week later, when the whole G Unit squad pulled up to Hot 97 together, 50 dropped even more details and even claimed Buck was dealing with a substance problem. That accusation hit hard. Buck stayed quiet for a couple weeks, probably trying to process how fast everything flipped on him. But on May 12th, 2008, he came back with a track called My Interview, responding to being kicked out the group and the allegations thrown at him. Things stayed calm for a moment, until June hit. On June 15th, 2008, young Buck got on stage and publicly dissed G-Unit. That was it. The line crossed, the bridge burned, the point of no return. And just 2 days later, on June 17, 2008, 50 dropped the full recorded phone call, the one where Buck was crying, asking 50 for help, exposing his financial stress to the whole world. And that moment right there, that's the one that changed everything for Buck forever. The very next day, June 18th, 2008, Buck fired back with a diss track called The Tape Conversation, and the game even jumped on the remix to show support. A few days later, on June 21st, word started spreading about a possible collab mixtape between Buck and Game titled Worth More Than 50 Cent, supposedly dropping in July. But that project never came to life. Then July 1st, 2008 hit, and G-Unit dropped their second album, Terminate On Sight. Buck was only featured on 4 tracks, basically treated like a guest on an album that should have been his squad's own project. It was a loud message without anyone saying a word. For the rest of 2008, Buck barely released new music, and according to him, it was because 50 was blocking his moves. Since Buck was still contractually signed to G-Unit Records, 50 could stop any official album or major release from dropping. That forced Buck into a corner, and he had to switch up his whole strategy. Starting in 2009, he decided to flood the streets with mixtapes instead, going straight to the fans with no label interference. And here's something real ones noticed quick. 2009, Buck sounded hungrier, sharper, and more raw than he had in years. You could hear the emotion, the frustration, the survival instincts in every verse. It was like he took all the chaos around him and poured it straight into the booth. Buck dropped multiple mixtapes in 2009, including Back for the Streets on April 11th and the highly praised Back on My Buck on May 26th. Tracks like I Want It All and I Got It, featuring Young Jeezy, showed Buck at his most locked in, fully motivated to prove he wasn't going anywhere. But while he was pushing out heat on the mixtape circuit, his personal and legal problems were building up to a whole new level, heavy enough to crush anybody. On August 3rd, 2010, the IRS raided Buck's home over more than $300,000 in unpaid taxes. And during that search, they found a hammer. Because of Buck's prior conviction from the 2004 Vibe Awards incident, they hit him with charges, even though he insisted the hammer belonged to his licensed tour manager. Just 3 days after that raid, Buck dropped a track called My Campaign, addressing everything head on. It was another reminder of Buck's wild talent, the ability to take whatever life threw at him and immediately turn that pain into music, flipping stress into pure bars with fire in his voice. Then on August 19th, 2010, Buck filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy. But here's the part most people never talk about. That bankruptcy didn't just help him deal with debt. It actually became the key that finally freed him from his G-Unit Records contract. It was a strategic move hidden inside a desperate situation, and it changed everything for him. Once he was loose from the label, Buck dropped his independent album, The Rehab, on September 7th, 2010. It debuted at number 55 on the Billboard 200 and sold a little over 6,400 copies its first week. Not huge numbers, but for an indie release with no major push, it was still a solid showing, even though it was nowhere close to the heights he'd once reached. But the legal mess didn't stop. It kept stacking up like crazy. In March 2011, G-Unit Records hit Buck with a $10 million lawsuit, adding even more stress to everything he was already dealing with. Then out of nowhere, there was a tiny spark of hope. In late 2011, 50 Cent randomly tweeted, "For some reason, I think young Buck is mad at me. Who cares? I'm giving my $250,000 back, sucker." It wasn't exactly friendly, but it showed Buck was still on 50's mind. Then things took an even darker turn. On March 4th, 2012, Buck survived a drive-by shooting outside a club in South Nashville. His girl got hit in the shoulder, and the situation shook the whole city. Just a few months later, on July 13th, 2012, Buck was officially sentenced to 18 months in prison on the weapon charges tied to the IRS raid. And the humiliation didn't stop there. The very next month, the IRS held a public auction of Buck's belongings. His jewelry, his studio gear, everything. They only collected around $53,000, but the whole situation was a painful reminder of how far Buck had fallen from the top. He turned himself in during August 2012 to start his 18-month sentence. But when he got out on October 2nd, 2013, something absolutely shocking happened. Something nobody saw coming. Behind the scenes, 50 Cent had slowly been repairing things with Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo, and apparently, he'd been thinking about Buck too. Then on June 1st, 2014, at Hot 97 Summer Jam, 50 did the unthinkable. He brought out all 3 original G-Unit members. The crowd lost it. It was an official G-Unit reunion, fully restored and louder than ever. They even dropped 2 EPs, The Beauty of Independence on August 25th, 2014, and The Beast is G-Unit on March 3rd, 2015, proving the group really was back in action for a moment. Both projects brought real heat, and fans were hyped because the reunion finally felt genuine. Buck got back in his bag and started dropping his ambitious 10 mixtape series. 10 bullets, 10 bricks, 10 pints, 10 bodies and more between 2015 and 2018. It showed he was still a machine in the studio, locked in and grinding nonstop. But just when it seemed like he was rebuilding for real, more legal problems came crashing down. On July 15, 2016, he got arrested for allegedly threatening to burn down his ex-girlfriend's apartment and ended up serving 7 months inside. Another setback, another blow to his momentum. But in 2018, the energy flipped again. Buck dropped Can't Lose on March 30th, 2018, and the track was straight fire. It should have blown up way bigger than it did. He even announced his 3rd studio album would be executive produced by both 50 Cent and Dr. Dre, and fans were losing it because that combo could have been legendary. But once again, the relationship between Buck and 50 broke down fast. 50 said Buck owed him over $300,000 and hit him with cease and desist orders every time Buck tried to drop new music. Then in 2019, leaked audio of Buck talking with a trans person hit the internet, and instead of handling it respectfully, 50 mocked him online and pushed homophobic jokes, making the situation way worse and shutting down any chance of G-Unit coming back together again. That moment basically slammed the door shut for good. By 2020, Buck filed for bankruptcy again, this time specifically to escape the contract and dodge 50's lawsuit. But after a long fight, the court ruled against him in 2023. Buck agreed to pay $200,690 out of the alleged $250,000 debt. To manage all that, plus his other bills, he had to liquidate around $1.05 million worth of assets and still ended up dropping about $445,000 on legal fees alone. Through all of it, you could see the weight he was carrying and how hard he was trying to fight his way back. And after everything was settled, there was only about $600,000 left for the creditors, showing just how heavy this whole battle had been on Buck's pockets and his peace of mind. Then in April 2025, things took another rough turn. Buck got arrested again and hit with a 30-day jail sentence for repeatedly violating his bond conditions tied to his pending 2020 domestic assault case. He ended up being released around May 12, 2025. His domestic assault trial is now pushed back to January 12, 2026. But even with all that hanging over him, Buck looks like he's finally in a better space mentally and emotionally. He's back active on social media, celebrating moments like the 18th anniversary of Straight Outta Cashville, showing love to fans, and focusing on rebuilding his legacy instead of getting stuck in the old drama. Thank you for watching. Make sure you drop a comment, hit that like button, subscribe, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.